There are over 500 standing stone sites in Scotland. That's more than any other country in the world. Why were they built? What purpose did they serve? All great questions, but as yet almost impossible to answer. Unless we invent a time machine, we can only guess. I want to see what local children think about them, what legends surround them, how these mystical places fire up their imagination. After winding my way up from Glasgow through Perth and Dundee, I veer off the main A90 and meander over the hills that lead down to the River Dee and the town of Aboyne. I want to visit the stone circle at Tomnaverie the day before my first school visit, see where they actually sit in relation to the countryside. Fairly close to the town of Tarland, the Tomnaverie stone circle is situated at the top of a small hill that has an excellent 360-degree view of the whole region. Smaller than I imagined, Tomnaverie is still very neatly set out, the main feature being two tall pillars that flank a huge horizontal block. There is evidence of previous fires around this block, and it has been suggested that it was used for burial rites or even human sacrifice. Scary stuff. But the weather's warm and I spot a kestrel hovering over the fields beside the car park. Skylarks are singing their hearts out and supply a wonderful soundscape, only interrupted by the occasional call of a cuckoo somewhere far off in the distance. The site seems to have been built at the edge of cultivated land, and the earliest recorded feature is that large recumbent stone that follows the crest of Loch Nagare, a hill about 20 miles away. This great stone would have highlighted the full moon around Midsummer's Day, so there may have been some kind of link with the skies. It is thought that humans inhabited Scotland as much as 750,000 years ago, but their time here was intermittent. Extreme weather and climate change often forced them back out again. Eventually, between 14,000 and 12,000 years ago, the great sheets of ice that marked Scotland's last ice age were melting away, and people who looked pretty similar to you and me began moving into the newly uncovered areas. Sea levels were much lower, and the UK was still joined on to the rest of Europe, right up until about 8,000 years ago. At this point, the sea level rose enough to separate us from the rest of Europe. 1,000 years after this, 7,000 years ago, the people who inhabited Scotland changed from being hunter-gatherers to farmers. They became more settled and organised. It is somewhere between this point and 5,000 years ago that the stone circles were erected. After exploring Tomnaverie, I paid a visit to Aboyne Primary School and addressed a packed assembly. I'm no historian, certainly not an expert on standing stones, but we all had great fun talking about them. Strangely, if we look at other parts of the world, the people around that time were building their own stone structures all over the place. The pyramids in Egypt, North Africa, are thought to be about the same age as most of the Scottish standing stones, as are the pyramids recently discovered in Brazil, which is in South America. What was going on? Why all the fuss back then? We may never know, but we are left with some amazing structures to wonder at. Anyway, I'm getting away from the main reason I'm doing this trip. Yes, to inform a bit, but it's mostly to inspire. You see, a ring of stones inspired me to write the first page of my first ever book, Talisman. And I'm hoping that I can share some of my writing techniques with the children I visit, so that they in turn can write their own story, using the standing stones as a starting point. So, I soon delve into building up a character, something that may have come out of Tomnaverie. We use our imagination as a big group to make up a newly named monster. The children have great fun drawing this new creature of the stones, and in their classes they add all sorts of features and special adaptations. Everyone is suddenly shouting out ideas and assigning their creature special powers. We talk about what it might eat, what it might smell like, and even what it might sound like. Here are some of the creatures the children at Aboyne came up with. All different, all inspired with the stones on Tomnaverie, and well on their way to being fully formed characters in their own right. We also talked about some of the legends that surrounded the stones at Tomnaverie, and while doing this, I discovered that the children knew about a site that was even closer to their school, a place called the Devil's Claw. Set in a forest, it seems to have a few of its own legends. Here are a few of the children telling us about these in their own words. Okay, Kaylee, do you want to tell me a wee bit about the Devil's Claw, which is another stone circle a lot closer to, in fact, in Aboyne, isn't it? Do you want to tell me a bit about that?
When the Celts were around, when they won a battle, they went there and they painted the stones blue.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we're in Aboyne Primary School, and we found out there are some other stone circles closer to Aboyne even than Tomnaverie. So do you want to tell us about the other place? What's it called? Well, this boy first.
The Devil's Claw.
It's called Devil's Claw.
Yeah,
and is this Gil? Oh, you want to tell me why it's called Devil's Claw?
Yeah, well, it's like 5 stones placed that, and like brass is the hand, and then the 5 stones are like the claw. And then
Strange. And you said you felt a bit strange when you were there as well. It'd be a bit weird.
it does make quite a comfy place to sit though.
It does make comfy place to sit. Okay. So it wasn't that scary then, no? No. And also, can we talk about Tomnaverie? Hands up who's been at Tomnaverie again. I'll just say that again. So you all went to Tomnaverie. And somebody talked about the big stones there. The big stone, I'll just focus on the board a minute. There's a big stone with 2 either side. So what did that, somebody had a story that started with that. Who was that? Had a story, was it yourself?
About the summer solstice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were told that on the and found out on the plaque that tells you some theories about the stone circle. It said that in the summer solstice at midnight, the moon would actually appear in the center of the stone. Well, not like the proper center because of the mountains, obviously, but it would be in line with the center of it.
So it was going to be in line with the moon. Fantastic. And somebody said they had an idea what might happen in a story if it started. Was it yourself?
Yes.
So just to tell, come a bit closer so we can hear. So you're starting a story starting in the stone circle.
Yeah, so you would start in the stone circle, say at midnight. The middle of the 2 standing stones, the middle one that's lying down, would say move, and there'd be, so you could say a coffin or something. Say a monster would come out.
Okay, and what about the other stones round about? Somebody said something would happen to them. Did they turn into other? Did somebody say they'd come alive? Little?
Oh yeah.
Was it yourself?
Yeah.
What did you say about that? That was quite good as well.
Well, if you go to Tomnaverie Circle, you would get hypnotised by the magical powers of the stones, and the more you get hypnotised, the monsters, the stones start turning into monsters, and when you're fully hypnotised, they, eat you.
Okay, that's okay. So that's a bit strange, a bit scary, but it just shows you how stories can start and your imagination can be fired up when you go to these places. Later that same day, I visited Braehead Primary School, next to the River Don, north of Aberdeen. Here the children discussed the stone circles again, and then, after hearing a reading from Talisman about a gargoyle, they began to design their own creature, give it characteristics, and then think about their own stories. A good tip when writing a story is to read it out loud. This helps you decide where the punctuation would be. I always think of punctuation as a way of letting the story breathe. It should flow as you read it. You should be able to tell your story without running out of breath. Where there's a short pause, insert a comma. In my opinion, a sentence that is too long can draw excitement away from the story. Features and creatures. I always like to look at anything interesting along the way. Animals, birds, special places. I'm going to tell you a little about the River Dee. The River Dee runs to the south of the city of Aberdeen. By the time it reaches Aberdeen, it will have dropped over 3,500 feet from the Cairngorm Mountains and will have travelled about 120 miles. It is especially rich in salmon and wildlife, and the area that surrounds it is often known as Royal Deeside, because Queen Victoria loved the area so much and built Balmoral Castle on its banks. Aberdeen is flanked by 2 rivers. Can you name the other river to the north of Aberdeen? The creature for this blog is the kestrel. My Tiffy Toffee picture books for younger children feature a kestrel called Kenny Kestrel, but the real-life bird is just as clever and has a few interesting adaptations for hunting mice and voles. Kestrels can hover in one place, beating their wings fast and adjusting to compensate for the wind. They have fantastic eyesight and can see in ultraviolet, which lets them pick out the pea trails of their prey. Yeah, you heard me right. Voles and mice are constantly urinating to mark their territory, and this can unfortunately be their downfall. The male and female birds are very similar, but the male kestrel has a slate grey head and tail, while the female has a brown striped head and tail. Here are the challenges attached to this blog. 1. When did humans first inhabit the UK? 2. When did people start building great stone features all over the world? 3. What is the river called that runs north of Aberdeen? 4. What gender is the kestrel holding the mouse in the last picture? Bye for now.